Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aline McNall. I'm a Senior Legislative Representative here at IEEE-USA, and I'll be doing the legislative update today. Today's update is during a congressional recess, so there's not too much new to report, but I'm certainly happy to discuss some of the late-breaking bills that passed right before Congress went out on recess, and happy to certainly answer any questions from members of IEEE who might be listening in online. So a lot of appropriations bills were discussed right before the August recess. So I wanted to kind of go over certain key agencies that we care about, and certainly happy to answer any questions that any of you might have. And then I can go through and talk about some of the authorization bills that also passed right before the congressional recess. So Congress is definitely still negotiating the appropriations bills. There are 12 bills. We care about a few of them. Mainly, we care about the defense bill. We care about the energy and water appropriations bill, and then also the commerce, justice, science appropriations bill that has NASA, NIST, and NSF in it. And we do care about a lot of those different science programs in that bill. So going through the defense bill, I'll talk about the House and the Senate. So those of you who are looking online can certainly see the screen with some of this information on it. But the House Defense Appropriations Bill was $761.7 billion, which is an increase of $33.2 billion, whereas the Senate's bill was $792.1 billion, which was an increase of $63.6 billion. There is funding for Ukraine in both bills. In the House, it is $300 million. And then in the infrastructure upgrades section of the Senate bill, that was $4.7 billion. Climate was certainly a hot topic for this, is a hot topic for this administration, and was very prevalent, in particular in the House bill, with $2.5 billion in clean energy and climate adaptation programs. Environmental restoration is, of course, part of both bills. And then in terms of the research funding, IEEE really focuses a lot on the research development testing funding. So $131.7 billion, which is an increase of $1.6 billion in the House. And then in the Senate, there was also quite a bit of funding in the RDT&E budget. I did not put that on the slide, though. So in terms of the Senate bill, one of the things we were noting is the space development and resilience section, which is $2.2 billion. There's a lot in the space section, particularly on Space Force and things like the Indo-Pacific LEO missions, enhancing medium Earth orbit activities, operational testing and training infrastructure for Space Force, and then defensive measures for space assets, as well as some tactical programs. In the House bill, kind of some of the provisions I was looking at include the cyberspace activities provisions and the cyberspace operations funding. There's also some funding in there for network resilience and research. So all in all, very good negotiations are ongoing. The Defense Appropriations Bill is certainly one that a lot of our members care about. So looking at the 6.1 funding, which is the basic research, the 6.2, which is applied, and the 6.3 funding as well. So those are three funding lines we care a lot about. And then I've been going through and looking at the cybersecurity funding as well. And hopefully we can continue negotiating with Congress to ensure robust funding for these programs that fund many of the projects that you all are involved in. Let's see. In terms of energy appropriations, so this is the next appropriations bill that we follow closely. The House bill was $56.3 billion, which is an increase of $3.4 billion, whereas the Senate had $49.3 billion for the Department of Energy, which is an increase of $4.5 billion. So we're pleased with both of those numbers, particularly pleased with the energy efficiency funding, and especially in the House. This is the largest funding increase that the House has ever created for the energy efficiency programs. And that includes the energy efficiency renewable energy, $4 billion. And that includes funding for weatherization programs. In the House, it was $3.799 billion. So still a really large funding increase. This is a priority for the administration, and both the House and Senate are taking that into consideration as they look at funding for those programs. For those of you in the academic sector, the Office of Science, of course, is the largest funder of basic research. So $8 billion and $8.1 billion respectively in the House and the Senate. So that's a fairly good number, and we're certainly negotiating for that to be as high as possible in these appropriations negotiations. For those of you who do ARPA-E, of course, the high risk, high reward research there, in the House it's 550 million, and the Senate is 570 million. So again, we're hopeful that that funding is robust and can be helpful to IEEE members. Some of the other provisions in these bills include cybersecurity, the Office of Electricity, and of course, nuclear energy. Many of you are concerned with both the closing of nuclear plants, but also the funding of new nuclear power, so the small modular reactors, and this funding would come out of this appropriations bill. So we were pleased with the 1.78 billion in nuclear energy and the 1.765 billion in the Senate. In terms of NASA, we've been following, of course, the JWST accomplishments, and then are looking forward to Artemis. The appropriators have certainly been meeting with all sorts of stakeholders to discuss NASA funding, particularly moving forward. As I mentioned in the last update, with the Roscosmos withdrawal from ISS, that does affect some American funding in terms of kind of where we are in terms of our commercial space program and our aeronautics budget, as well as our other budgets within NASA science. So currently the negotiations are ongoing, and IEEE is having those conversations with Congress to ensure that the aeronautics budget and the science budget within NASA can be as high as possible. Currently, the House bill is at $25.45 billion, which is an increase of $1.4 billion, and the Senate is $26 billion, which is an increase of $1.9 billion. So certainly a focus. NASA Earth Science is seeing a lot of really good funding in this political environment. Obviously, again, this is a priority for the president, and climate programs at NASA have been certainly a political debate for many years, and we were pleased that these climate programs have been so robustly funded in this appropriation cycle in the 25 billion range. And then in terms of NASA Science, that's another funder of more basic research, and many of you in the academic community are funded here. And we're looking at a $7.9 billion or $8 billion funding level, depending on which House or Senate bill we're looking at. The Senate bill does fully fund the JWST program as well as the Mars Sample Return program. And so those are two of the many programs that we've been tracking, and are pleased with the Senate numbers there. In terms of NIST appropriations, the Senate appropriated $1.7 billion, which is an increase of 468 million, I should say, not billion there. Sorry, that was a typo, which is a 38% increase. NIST measurement labs did receive a $975 million funding level in the Senate, which is an increase of 125 million. The Hollings manufacturing program and the Manufacturing USA programs are two of which we follow closely. And the Manufacturing USA programs in the Senate bill funds two new NIST-sponsored institutes, so we were pleased with that. In terms of the maintenance backlog, that's a conversation we've been having with Congress for years. We're pleased that the Senate has tried to address it through the $120 million that they've appropriated for maintenance issues. That maintenance backlog is at an $830 million plus level. And so it's certainly a significant backlog relative to the total funding of this agency. Obviously, many agencies have maintenance backlogs, NASA and NSF do as well. But in terms of the percentage, IEEE has really focused on NIST just because the $830 million is such a big percentage of the $1.7 billion budget of the agency. And so we are hopeful that the Senate and the House can come to an agreement on how to address this maintenance backlog so that the labs can stop leaking and research can move forward in a way that's productive for both the taxpayers who are funding it, but also for the research community in general. And I know many of you are hopeful as well, and we share, happy to share your stories of kind of issues in this area and other areas that you're facing as you are funded by some of these federal research agencies. If there are things that you are experiencing in your labs, please do reach out. Those stories are helpful in terms of, for example, addressing some of these issues and creating that argument that best supports the funding for some of these programs. For the NSF, IEEE has, of course, been really supportive of the CHIPS Act, which does include authorization for the NSF. And in terms of the appropriations for the agency, we're looking at a $10.3 billion number in the Senate and a $9.63 billion number in the House. Research and related activities in the Senate is at $8.3 billion, whereas in the House it's $7.7 billion. So we are pleased with those numbers and certainly hopeful for robust funding in the NSF research budget wherever we can get it. The Regional Innovation Partnerships Program is funded in the House bill specifically, and we are, of course, hopeful that the new tech directorate that was authorized in the CHIPS Act that was recently passed can receive as robust funding as possible. There's certainly discussions and debates within Congress and within the NSF of what percentage of the research funding will go towards this new directorate, and IEEE is certainly engaged in those discussions. Moving along to the National Defense Authorization Act, in reading through the House bill, the House passage was 329 to 101, and there's support for a lot of different programs. I've highlighted some in this slide here. So research and development for bioindustrial manufacturing, patentable inventions with the Navy, independent review and assessments for test and evaluation resources and planning, the cost studies for software and information technology. There's a study for sufficient testing and evaluation, some risk distribution discussions and studies, as well as the posture of of certain offices, and then a competitive review of cyber excellence service. So these are some of the provisions in this House bill. And then moving on to the Senate, both the Senate and the House bill, of course, have a lot of funding to support Ukraine, and they do uphold the U.S. commitment to NATO. But I did want to emphasize that those provisions exist in both bills. In the Senate bill is, of course, the Ukraine funding is $800 million for our international members. I thought that would be of interest. And then we have a $1 billion authorization for the National Defense Stockpile. For those of you in particular in Iowa and other areas where you're researching critical minerals and materials, some of this funding will go towards that research and ensuring that we have a good supply of these critical minerals for the U.S. In the NDAA, there's also authorizations for technology areas, including microelectronics and hypersonics. There's an increase in funding for the U.S. Cyber Command. There's environmental cleanup funding in both the House and Senate bill, and of course the NNSA funding, which some of you track very closely as well. Some new developments in the space sector. I wanted to touch on the White House released a plan for orbital debris. So some of you might be interested in reviewing that. A quick summary of that plan. There's improvements in terms of component design and mitigation of debris. There's establishment of best practices. There's tracking and characterization of the debris. There are provisions to try and improve device tracking, as well as space operations through research and assessment. There's shielding impact studies and spacecraft surface provisions in there as well. Research and development of remediation technologies and policies that address all aspects of debris. And in terms of IEEE's interaction, we're hoping to continue having dialogues with the space community to certainly address the issues of orbital debris that are, of course, increasing as we launch more and more things into space. And we're looking at the international community as well as the U.S. community's kind of ways of addressing issues, including orbital debris. So we were very pleased with that plan released by the White House, and hopeful that these dialogues can move forward so that this particular issue can be addressed in ways that help all of the spacefaring nations. Space regulations is a topic that will be addressed in the September 9th meeting of the National Space Council. So that's the next meeting of the Space Council. And IEEE is looking forward to hopefully commenting on some of these regulation discussions. So basically what it comes down to is the United States is looking to revise commercial space regulations. And IEEE is, of course, very interested in this area just because these regulations will cover many aspects of commercial space, from satellite communications and remote sensing to commercial space stations, as well as satellite serving and lunar missions. The kind of provisions that they will look at will hopefully be amenable to the international community, of course. And of course, the White House is well aware of Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty. And so these new regulations will be in line with that Outer Space Treaty, but will also ensure U.S. leadership in commercial space, and will ensure that we can maintain our commercial space program and our partnerships at the commercial as well as the federal level. Some of you who are contractors might be interested in hearing about AB 5. So this is a law in California, and currently in terms of a federal law, the Department of Labor is looking to change the federal law as it relates to independent contractors. And so they're looking at the California law for sure. And they haven't made any progress, yes, in terms of passing an actual law yet, but currently are discussing how the California law is being implemented. And so the Department of Labor is having listening sessions, and IEEE has certainly reached out to the Department of Labor to discuss this issue. There's an AB 5 test, which some of you are familiar with, and this whole issue is certainly one that we're following and working with the Department of Labor on. I'm happy to keep you all updated as those discussions move forward. For those of you who have been following the news, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act did pass. And in terms of IEEE, we really have focused just on the energy provisions within this particular authorization bill, or this particular bill. And in terms of, we were pleased that it sets the targets to reduce carbon emissions by 40% by 2030. And then we've been looking at the climate change provisions as well as the energy security provisions. And so that's a bill that our office has been coming through a bit in the recent week. And we're hopeful that some of these provisions can move forward in support of our energy policy work and our energy policy expertise. And we're looking forward to kind of continuing those discussions with Congress to address both U.S. energy security and then also renewable energy and climate-related issues as they are beneficial to the U.S. energy sector. For those of you who might be looking to donate some funding to IEEE, I did want to flag that we do have some voluntary funds. And information is online at IEEEfoundation.org. The three funds that we do ask for support include the IEEE-USA Fund, the Fellows Fund, and the Student Public Policy Fund. So for those of you who are interested, more information is, of course, available on our website. Thank you so much, and this ends the legislative update, and I'm happy to answer questions. For those of you who are online, feel free to include those in the chat, and we will put them on the screen as they come through. I am not seeing any questions, so if any of you do have them, please feel free to put them in the chat. For those of you who are watching this at a later time and not live, and if you do have questions, my email is available in the last slide here. a.mcnall@ieee.org, and I'd be happy to answer your questions online by email if that's easier for you all. Seeing no more comments or questions in the chat, though, I think we'll end this broadcast today, and I look forward to speaking with you all in September. Thank you so much.
I had the coolest job that any electrical engineer could ever have on the ground crew for Solar Impulse 2, the first solar-powered airplane to fly around the world only using the power of the sun. IEEE-USA has given me a competitive edge because of their support system. It is so much easier doing something and being out of your comfort zone when you have someone there saying, "You got this." IEEE-USA is more than just a network. It's a family.